be put on PropM for supervisors. And ultimately, the part of the initiative that was the mandate for conformity, we had to go through the legislative route to get the law changed in San Francisco to make the master plan and the planning code consistent. It had never been an ordinance before. It became an ordinance. But it affected the technicality of how PropM was applied to projects. And so it was out of that whole weirdness of how it was put on the ballot and how it came down that other things have come up. I'm going to let Dale chime in on this a little. We can chime in a lot. But in the whole kettle of fish, we forced the city to do 2 studies. One is the amount of office state development the city could absorb, and secondarily, how much housing needed to be produced for that office space to be built. And it was front-loaded in terms of the housing and the transit fees. And it lasted for a long time. And the cheating that's gone on, there was one of the weird things that happened in the middle of this, and Marcia Rosen was always the attorney for the housing people. She was always the attorney for the housing developers, and I was always the environmental attorney for SFRG. We had the same interests, but Marcia was really expert on housing. And so we nailed down the definition jointly of what is an office space, because it affected the housing fee and it affected PropM. And so we said it was only office if it was primary office, not accessory, and they had to pay the fees. The problem that we have had is there has been enormous cheating. Enormous, humongous cheating. And it's one of the things I'm still dealing with. So I'm going to shut up and let Dale chime in. So the whole thing on PropM, this is my bottom line. It was driven by housing for the workforce, not housing for people who have pied-à-terres in the city. Is this much housing has to be produced to deal with the people who work here, who are trying to find housing here and trying to get to work here. That is why we are all focused on workforce housing. That's why I'm focused on workforce housing. You can speak for yourself.
Excuse me, point of information, I don't know who the gentleman.
Dale Carlson.
Yeah, that's
He was Commissioner
I was about
Carlson.
to introduce myself.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Sue's a legend. I'm not.
This is my voters handbook.
But 30 years ago, I was a delegate to the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods. I was
From
the
what
president.
neighborhood?
Pardon me?
What neighborhood?
I was the president of the Stanton Fulton Neighborhood Association. I think ours is the only neighborhood association in town that's named after an intersection. I worked with the Francisco Heights folks to persuade the University of San Francisco not to build a set of windmills on the western slope of Lone Mountain. And I worked with the folks from University Terrace when USF wanted to build the Correct Recreation Center and a soccer field and a 10 megawatt cogeneration plant. We're going into the power business.
Yeah.
And they worked with me when we were doing battle with St. Mary's Hospital, which wanted to knock down a block of housing. The south side of Fulton, between Stanton and Schrader. They wanted to tear down a block of housing for a medical office building. And that was a case that went to the Supreme Court as well, because St. Mary's planned on buying all those units, and if they couldn't come to terms with the owners, they planned on exercising eminent domain. It was quite an experience. So, I have a long history with the coalition, and I have a long history with Sue. And there's a couple of things that I think are worth pointing out. In 1983, when we were on the ballot and we lost by such a narrow margin, a big part of the problem was not that we were outspent in that campaign. We're always outspent in these campaigns by a huge multiple. Our problem was we did not have the money to wage the campaign that we needed in order to win. That was our problem. That's where we fell short. When Sue started suing one high-rise developer after another, and losing and losing and losing, and finally a court came to the conclusion that, you know, these cumulative impacts that she's talking about, that's a significant issue. And the city is going to have to make these developers go back and redo their environmental impact reports to take into account the cumulative impacts of one high-rise after another going up in the financial district in the South of Market. And there were a couple of developers who said, we don't really want to do that. So, Sue, could we settle? Sure. And that's where we got the money. 1986.